and the Masters of the Universe.
The stories in Season 1 of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe introduced viewers to the exciting world of Eternia and all the heroes and villains that exist there. Teela, Orko, Battle-Cat faced countless challenges from Skeletor and his evil minions and learned many important lessons about life along the way. Now, you can learn how these fantastic stories came to be from the writers and artists who created our adventures. You have the power.
In the Diamond Ray of Disappearance, which was, of course, the pilot script, there were key characters that had to be introduced, obviously. He-Man, Orko, Skeletor, Man-at-Arms, a few of the villains that were going to be the key villains, Teela. So yeah, there was very much a checklist, but whenever I hear the word checklist, I always think people are going to think it's a toy company checklist, and by no means was it. It was really a checklist from our conception of the show, who the key characters were, and to introduce both the audience and the other writers to these characters and how they spoke and how they interacted. In the Diamond Ray of Disappearance, I introduced the villains in a very systematized way, and I didn't really do that with the heroes. The reason for it was really the story started with the villains, and that's always a fun way to start an animated episode. It's just kind of a format that I've often used, and I had used in the past. And I didn't want to do the same thing with the heroes. I thought it would just seem too predictable if I did the exact same thing with the heroes that I'd just done with the villains. So I sort of arbitrarily picked the villains to introduce in a formalized way and introduce the heroes more within natural settings and interactions, simply so as not to repeat myself in the same episode. The Diamond Ray of Disappearance, I was really so focused on introducing all the various elements that had to go into an episode, I really focused less on the actual story. And I don't think that's one of the stronger stories that I wrote, and I've been interested to see on some of the fan sites that they agree that it's not a great story. And I also was very appreciative that some of the fan sites actually noted the challenge and have seemed to have forgiven me for the weakness in the story by grasping that I had another agenda besides just telling a great story. So I came up with the Diamond Ray of Disappearance really just as a MacGuffin, which is that's a writer's term for a device that will drive the plot, but is not really that important in and of itself, because the plot is really more about the characters and how the characters conflict. And the Diamond Ray of Disappearance was just really a device for me to have Skeletor seek and be able to use, and something to sort of pivot the action around.
We don't need a wand, not with Faker here.
You forget, He-Man. I have your power too.
When I saw the Faker toy, he's He-Man. He's just colored different plastic, and I'm going like, wow, you're trying too hard with this one. And the thinking behind him was, pure toy company logic. I can see their point, though, is like if the toy line's successful, there'll be a ton of knockoffs of the characters. Everybody's going to do one, so let's do our own knockoff character, before somebody else beats us to the punch. So Faker was basically He-Man recolored. We never really got to use him that much, and I think at the time I was sort of arguing to make him more like Bizarro in the Superman comics. If he is an imperfect duplicate of He-Man, let's go all the way to Bizarro Town. Let's actually have him appear normal until this weird coloration appeared. We were never able really to do that with him, but I was always thinking like, well, he's our version of Bizarro. Let's play him a little bit like that. And for whatever reason we didn't. Maybe it was because other writers couldn't figure out something to do with the character, or maybe they just wanted to stay away from a Bizarro type character. Not that he had to talk in the strange way that Bizarro does, but just let's have a duplicate of him running around. So, but for whatever reason, it just never worked out. So we threw him in this one, and then I guess I kind of lost track of the character. I don't think I ever used him again.
I remember another incident which was really extraordinary, and it really reflects who Lou Scheimer is and what the intent of the show was to him in the studio. I really do believe. Lou really did care about what was going out there. and what the audience was going to see and hear and how they would be influenced by it. And I remember an episode where He-Man had an evil twin. And the evil twin obviously was wreaking havoc on Eternia. And everybody thought it was He-Man, of course. And in the final confrontation at the end of the show, He-Man was at the edge of a cliff with his back to the cliff. The evil twin was facing him, threatening him. And he came forward, and if I remember, they wrestled a bit or something like that. And in the subsequent struggle, the evil twin disappeared into a bottomless crevasse. And that was going to be the end of the evil twin. Well, I remember the screening. I was sitting at the moviola. We used moviolas at that time, which is an amazing thing in and of itself. You're all gathered around this small screen, and you're hearing the clackety-clack of the film. And Lou was behind me, and the director was there, and we're screening it, and all of a sudden, I heard Lou say, "Whoa, wait a second, Rick, play that back." So I rewound it, and we played through it again, and he said, "Well, I don't want He-Man killing, so I don't want it to imply that He-Man's the one that caused that. What can we do? What can we do with this?" So we all started working on it, and what eventually, they brought the writer down, and they reworked the scene, and what they eventually ended up doing was perhaps some overkill, but it was really something that they wanted to show very clearly, that he was reacting to a threatening situation. He was not the perpetuator of it, or he was not the instigator of it. They had him standing at the cliff, and the evil twin came towards him, and he started saying, "No, get back," and he stepped aside, and as the twin came towards him, the twin tripped over a rock and fell into the crevasse, which obviously completely changes the consequence or the circumstances. And that's how it ended. But it meant enough to Lou that he wanted to rework that entire section.
When I hear a title like Curse of the Spellstone, I know that that's one of mine. I remember titling it that. But the twists and turns of the storyline, who knows? But if it has raging storms or things like that, it's basically me saying, okay, what didn't I do in the other ones I've written? What's different? What's visually different? And how can I utilize that in a way that's going to be fun in terms of the characters interacting with the weather? But that'll often be something where I might have said to Arthur Nadell, okay, can you do a storm? Can you have these logistics? Because the good part is they would tell me. I mean, there wouldn't be a case where I would write something, particularly at script level, and they'd say, well, we just can't do that. Because first of all, they would never have greenlit a premise that they couldn't make. And secondly, they wouldn't give themselves that kind of headache down the road. They knew what they were capable of.
They had a script, and the script was literally sitting on the desk with a stake through it. And when they called it the script that would not die, because about 5 writers had taken a bash at it, and no one could beat it. It was literally had a stake through it. And they said, we'd like you to take a look at this and see if you could make something out of it. I think that was Time Carter. And I said, well, okay, I can do that. And then I took what is the strangest move for a kid to ever take. I read it and I said, this really stinks. I said, I'd like to do it, but I'd like to throw out everything that's here and start all over again. I'd like to write a new story and write a new script from that. And that's how that script was made, the Time Carter script was made. And I was the one who beat it. I took the stake out of the heart of that script, and it was filmed. And I think that's another reason they put me on stage.
I'm, pleased to hear that the fans enjoyed the Dragon Invasion. Again, as I said, it's so surprising that any of this stuff has survived the test of time that much. But it's nice to know that it's considered to be one of the better episodes. I remember wanting to put in a mother dragon and some eggs, and Arthur was all over that, because he thought, good, motherhood, even dragon motherhood, I said, if you want, Arthur, I'll try and work in some apple pie. I approached that episode as if it were sort of a straight sword and sorcery type story. And I tried not to get too involved or concerned about the silliness of some of the characters. In fact, I remember at this point that when I wrote the first draft of the of the show, I actually substituted another name for He-Man. I forget what it was, but I made up a name in my own head, and I substituted that because I could not get behind the name of He-Man. You know, it was just at that point, it was just too silly for me. I mean, I know that it tested well, and that's why they did it, but, and then later on, you know, on the other show, it wasn't an issue. But it helped me get past that initial lump of writing for it. Yes, there was a scene that I put in the episode with where he got crushed by a rock right in the middle of the transformation. And I remember they were a little bit taken aback at this because, you know, it's like, well, I don't know if we can stop a stock sequence. I just said, you know, it'll be something different. It will surprise people because they will not be expecting it to happen in the middle of the transformation because the transformation is always, you know, one set deal. And Arthur said, yeah, okay, let's see if we can do it. And so we did it. That's another thing that will give them, within reason, they were willing to try different things, you know, to experiment a little bit and play with the formula a little bit. So I was kind of pleased that they did that. The character of Chopper was the only time he was used, was in my episode. I don't remember much about him except that Arthur wanted to use characters that were other than, you know, white Caucasian space guys. So, and I had no problem with that. So we picked the character, I think, primarily because he was Asian American, even though he was a bad guy. I mean, I said, is anybody gonna have a problem with him being a bad guy? And Arthur said, well, maybe we can redeem him at the end of the show, which we didn't do.
The 3 episodes I wrote were very female-oriented and very strong females, and I was very proud that these were going on. That, you know, I've always felt you can be a strong female and feminine, and that was what was kept. And one of my favorite episodes is Like Father, Like Daughter, where Tila, her father being the scientist, they had just finished doing something, and she had helped her father and very much wanted to go on and use it. And even though her father said no, she went and did it. And she did it and found out she almost got in trouble. So there was, for me, He-Man wasn't just pure action adventure, and even having strong female characters, it still had other issues that, you know, it was that there were morals to it and a learning curve. The first episode assigned to me was Like Father, Like Daughter. And apparently, I didn't know this until a couple of years later. That was one of 2 episodes, I believe, that was being sent to other writers afterwards as samples because there really was no pilot. So I found it very interesting, and of course people would go, oh, I know you, and I know your name, and you do, I'm sorry, I don't remember you. And they went, oh, no, I read, you know, Like Father, Like Daughter. And I went, well, why would you have read that? That's what Filmation's been sending with another script. So I was very excited and honored that this was being, that my very first episode in a obviously long-running 25 years of a show, He-Man and Masters of the Universe, was chosen. I was honored.
When I was transferred into the storyboard department from layout after taking an animation test, don't ask me how that all worked exactly, but the first show I was given was Beastly Sideshow by Robbie London. I broke it down the way I usually do with notes and everything, and I looked at the stock system, and I thought, okay, what this needs to be about, I need angles. I have to really push this thing. I'm going to try to really give them something and even further their stock system into the work out of system, which means you take the basic stock of somebody walking, but you change the arm positions, you give them something to do. So, and it's still a shortcut because the animators had most of the work figured out, but they could just make this the appropriate action work. So I was doing things like having He-Man carrying things overhead with an upshot that worked out of a certain stock that looked like a Hercules scene out of a Steve Reeves movie. I was really trying to push the whole acting of the characters, trying to get something that, getting the expressions, instead of just using a stock, altering it slightly, so it had more expression, but keeping it very simple, but it gave a lot more life to it, I felt. And so that was actually, I was surprised. It was the first show I did there, and Robbie London came in and said, it's the happiest he's ever been with any storyboard that he's ever gotten, only to find out it was like 400 feet over length, and they had to cut 400 feet out of it. And that was a case of me going too far. I was just adding stuff and trying to do this, and really getting into the stock and filling it out completely.
My script, Reign of the Monster, was originally called Reign of the Monster God, and I remember Arthur Nadell telling me very specifically that we could not use the word God, and so I had to retitle it Reign of the Monster. Fortunately, I could use the word reign even though it had a silent G in it, so at least they did at least have some standards. So the question of how I came up with Molcrum the monster, you know, it may have been some play on Moloch. I'd seen Metropolis at that point, and there was this big monster that was just ravenous. It may have been an inspiration from that. It probably was.
Dawn of Dragoon was a script that really featured Orko, and Orko was a character, since I had really largely, with Hal Sutherland, created Orko, it was a character that was near and dear to my heart, and a character I really wanted to explore and develop further. And so I came up with the idea of going to Orko's homeland and finding out a little bit more about sort of what species and genus of Orko, and where it came from, and to have a show that really featured him and really had some fun with Orko. In Trala, everything works backwards, and you know, that was one of those ideas that in retrospect was a really good idea because it served so many functions at the same time. On one hand, it prevented Adam from transforming to He-Man, which was an important aspect of the story because Orko really had to carry the story. And the first question you'd ask is, why doesn't Adam become He-Man and solve the problem? So that was one advantage to having this be a backwards world. At the same time, it sort of fit Orko's personality and character as we, the audience, saw it, that he would come from a world that was sort of backwards. And that just allowed, you know, it allowed me to have some fun as a writer. I was 33 years old when I was working on He-Man, and I was obsessed with women. And I thought I'd like to get this obsession somehow into my script writing. And so I thought this was, since I identified with Orko anyway, I thought, I'm going to give Orko a girlfriend, and I'm going to have a romance as part of this story. And I thought that would just be a lot of fun. And so I made up a little girlfriend for Orko, and I called her Driel. There's a sequence at the very end of Dawn of Dragoon where Orko and Driel show face. In other words, they pull down their masks so they each see each other's face. It was one of the only times I ever had a creative disagreement with Arthur, and I remember it so strongly. And it was not an emotional or acrimonious dispute, but we just disagreed. I really wanted the audience to get to see Orko's face. And part of that was ego on my part, because I wanted to have the episode as my episode where we got to see this face that you never got to see before or since. Arthur insisted we can't show Orko's face, it'll ruin the magic. And you know, in retrospect, he was 1,000% right, completely. But at the time, I was very, very disappointed that we didn't get to see Orko's face. And to this day, I have no idea what Orko looks like. I have no idea. Hal would probably be able to tell you. I have no idea. You know, Arthur was right. That's part of the mystery, is I don't know what Orko looks like, and you know what? I don't really want to know what Orko looks like. The Royal Cousin was sort of one of these more message-driven episodes. And I think I hadn't written too much of Evelyn at the time, so I just, to make the job fresh for me, I think I used some of Evelyn in that show. And she's a very cold character. I think the idea of a female villain it's always fun. And so she was fun to write.
I had this idea about a character who was like a seer or an oracle type of character. And we thought it would be interesting to do it in a way that would be different, which would be to have her sing. So we went in, pitched the idea to Arthur. This is Brent Stevens, my wife at the time, and me. We went and pitched the idea, and Arthur said, it's a great idea. I think we're going to want to do it. Does she have to sing? We said, well, that's kind of the whole idea of the episode. I mean, they had two objections to the episode. Does she have to sing, and does there have to be a monster? I mean, I love those kind of notes because it's like, no, we don't have to do that. We just tear the whole thing up and start over. Because obviously the problem with her singing was that they had to pay her an extra amount and they had some kind of some kind of deal working out where you had to pay a little more money if they were going to like sing words or something. So they decided the way to do it was to have her sing wordlessly, just do the tones. The main restrictions that they put upon us, of course, were budgetary. Lou Scheimer was a master at cutting corners and producing the show as cheaply as possible, and still making it, I mean, it still looked pretty good because the background designs I thought were very interesting and innovative, and the character designs were pretty good within what they had to work with. The rest of it, I remember, was mostly just, again, a question of trying to do the monster within the budget that they wanted. And because we had a whole sequence in there where He-Man, where this monster shows up because she sung him awake, and he shows up and he's ripping up the city and everything, and He-Man and all the others are battling him. And I think Arthur sort of paled when he read it and said, we can't do any of this. So that's when I pitched him the idea that we would just have tentacles coming up from out of the ground. And he said, can it be just one tentacle? And I said, sure. You want me to make an invisible tentacle just to really... But it was always a challenge. It was, a lot of fun. I mean, I don't mean to harp on the budget so much, but it's what I remember most about the show was trying to write around all these obstacles that were put into its place. The budget and the nonviolence thing. The monster, I remember, was named Yog. And it's funny because we actually had come up with a name for the monster that was much longer and more involved. And it was a twisty kind of a Lovecraftian name that had a number of syllables and everything. And once again, they said, they're never going to be able to read this. Come up with something simpler. So I said, okay, fine, how about Yog? And they said, perfect!
The Wizard of Stone Mountain was extremely controversial, and I was very proud to be a part of it. Too often we think of action adventure as just, beating up the guy and, standing up like this, and that is not what this was about. There was such a subtext of such strong philosophies and morals that you would think, oh no, we can't do this for children, but yet isn't that what it is? And you had to, for me, what is evil? Are you born evil? No, I don't believe. I think you're born innocent and you end up wherever you go. And it was a wonderful opportunity to bring out some of these thoughts without, clouding everybody and hitting them over the head. I felt that I was proud that we were doing that. I was proud to be given the episode to do.
In Ordeal in the Darklands, there was a subplot about a shrinking device, and they cut it. And sometimes they'd cut subplots for time because the episode was running long, or they'd cut it because it's too complex for production. There were only so many shots they could do, so many scenes they could do. They were very rigorously budgeted. As a writer, you try to give them more than they needed so that they could scale back. Because what you don't want to do is you don't want them to be short, or you don't want them to suddenly call you at the 11th hour and say, come up with something on the spot that we need because we don't have enough. Additionally, with Ordeal in the Darklands, I like the phrase "the Darklands." It's funny because the novel I just wrote that just hit the LA Times bestseller list is called Ghostlands, and so you can see that I haven't learned anything. I'm still doing the same stuff. Also, at that time, Michael Reeves had written a novel called Dark World Detective, and I think that might have been a little tip of the hat to him because we were good friends, sometimes collaborators, and in fact, my wife and I were the maid of honor and the best man at his wedding. So. All of us were really good friends as well as collaborators on He-Man, and I think that camaraderie, that closeness, aided the quality of the show.
The Taking of Grayskull, to me, was one of the most tremendous learning curves as a writer, because that is not how it started. The episode was about Queen Mother, and it just didn't work. And I remember calling Arthur Nadel and going, I don't know how to say this, and at the time it wasn't popular to go, this synopsis, I can't make it work. It's just not happening, and it wasn't. And that was a great, sometimes it sounds great, we're gonna do this, and you get to it and you go, ooh, it doesn't work. So that's how it was changed, because there were parts of this other episode, the portal that I was trying to use where the Queen Mother was going to go back in time. And so we changed it all and made it the Taking of Grayskull. And in that particular episode as well, I started a B story with Orko, which it was his birthday, and he thought everybody was just forgetting it and shining it on. And in the end, of course, he found out they weren't. So I believe, because that wasn't there at all, but it gave us, you know, you need to have peaks and valleys, and you always, for me, as a dramatic writer, a dramatist, you know, there's always humor in drama. You've got to keep that going, or you're just, you know, going to get you, and you're going to not be as involved. You need to see. So there were two very nice issues going, and I just had a lot of fun doing it.
Until next time, this is He-Man wishing you good health and good luck.
I did want to do a story about something that everybody just thinks is so ugly that it has to be killed, when it really, if you give it 5 seconds, it'll tell you it's come in peace. But nobody gives it 5 seconds. It's up to He-Man to figure out that, hey, you shouldn't be trying to kill this thing. This thing is actually sentient and it's not trying to hurt us. They wouldn't buy that. I don't know why. They just said, it just doesn't. It doesn't go with us. That was one of the stories that I didn't get to do.
I think all the stories that I pitched were either accepted or else rejected for certain reasons. There was nothing that I really campaigned to do. I think there was maybe one story that I had pitched that I kind of liked, where ultimately they just said, this is getting too far afield, and that was where Skeletor had to go someplace to get, as I recall the story, it's been years, Skeletor was leaving on his own mission to find something that he had to get himself. He couldn't trust the other guys, some sort of object of power, and he left Evelyn in charge, and none of the other guys would listen to her. They just said, okay, we're going to go to a village, and we're basically going to wreck the village and have a vacation. Skeletor's gone, we don't have to listen to you. And so basically it was like 3 or 4 bad guys going off to a local town, and it was kind of like spring break almost. They just went to a town and smashed the place up and had a good time, and Evelyn was frustrated that nobody would listen to her, and He-Man had to come in and send the rowdies back to Snake Mountain. I think that was the only thing I thought, oh, that could be kind of fun if we did that. And they just said, He-Man's not in it. It's not very interesting.